Muay Thai scoring explained. Now, this topic has been heavily requested over the years, and I've just put off making a post about it because I knew how deep and convoluted we were going to get into this. So we're going to get into it now. And I had actually recorded this podcast episode yesterday. And when I sat down to edit it, I was like, why is there no audio? And I couldn't figure it out because all my settings in the recording were the same as usual. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it took me like the episode, just the recording alone without any edits, it was over an hour long. These recordings take a lot of energy and take a lot of effort. So it's not like I'm just spending an hour doing a recording. But looking on the bright side of things, I am re-recording this. Hopefully I don't forget anything. And I will split this into two parts because of how long it took me to get through this entire topic yesterday. So I guess something good to come out of it, right? So I'm going to split this into two parts. So the first part, we're going to be covering like general scoring. We're going to get into what is an advantage in scoring, what's a disadvantage in scoring. We're going to talk about the point system, seeing where we are at around the 30-minute mark. We may move on to traditional Muay Thai versus entertainment Muay Thai, but if we are past the 30-minute mark, then the second part of this episode will start with traditional Muay Thai versus entertainment Muay Thai. Okay, let's get into it. Muay Thai scoring can seem mysterious, especially since the criteria widely varies based on region and organization. And there's so many regions in the world now that have Muay Thai, and within those regions, like how many dozens of organizations. It's so complex that people, even those who have been involved in the sport for years, are still asking, how do you score this fight? For example, Thai fighters and Thai trainers, they've been involved with their entire lives. When they travel overseas, let's say to like Europe or the US to take a fight, most of the times they don't understand the scoring system. That's normal for outside of Thailand. So they might think that they won the fight, and then they'll think like, oh, how come I lost? How come the judges said that I lost? And also vice versa. So a lot of people who are used to fighting and watching fights in the US or Europe, and then when they go to Thailand, they're not used to the Thailand norms. So this guide will break down mostly how scoring works in Thailand, because Thailand is, the motherland of Muay Thai. So hopefully this is the model that most organizations have based their Muay Thai scoring criteria off. And Thailand, a lot of Thai traditions shape the criteria. And we're also going to talk about how that scoring in Thailand contrasts with scoring abroad and in entertainment-focused Muay Thai. Scoring is based on the sanctioning body's scoring criteria. Again, a lot of variation here, but hopefully the bulk of the scoring criteria is the same for Muay Thai. I am going to mention a lot of things from my own experience as a professional fighter that's been living in Thailand for almost 9 years now. And I've been involved in the sport for well over a decade, and I have like 60 professional fights. So a lot of this is going to be based off not just my own understanding, but my experience, and also from what I know about well-known sanctioning bodies and their criteria for scoring Muay Thai and looking at what is effective for winning and what is not. And as I said, there will be mentions and comparisons with scoring outside of Thailand, as well as for amateur Muay Thai. General scoring for Muay Thai. In Muay Thai, judges look at a combination of factors to determine the winner of a fight. Scoring is based off both offensive and defensive skills. So offenses are your attacks, so you throw things, you being aggressive. And defensive skills are blocking with your gloves when it comes to punches and elbows, blocking with your shins, evading. So it means that fighting and judging fights is not about just landing the most punches or kicks, but how well you defend, how well your balance is, and your overall control of the fight. Now, what earns points? When a fighter lands powerful and accurate hits with their points of contact. So in Muay Thai, we have our hands, we have our feet and shins, we have our knees, and we have our elbows. Judges are looking for clean, effective strikes that land on target with noticeable impact. In addition to striking, clinch work and sweeps are also taken into account. Again, this is a general overview. There are instances where sweeps are not taken into account, and we're going to talk about that in the second part of this episode. Here is how the scoring breaks down in the order of most important to least important. So scoring advantage is given to the fighter who, most important, lands the heaviest, most powerful, and accurate hits. So for example, one strong, clean body kick is favored over 6 but fast and light punches. Scoring advantage is given to the fighter who uses Muay Thai weapons to cause the opponent more physical damage and exhaustion. And this can include leg kicks that have the opponent limping. It can include cutting the opponent. Scoring advantage is given to the fighter who demonstrates effective Muay Thai defense techniques such as blocking and countering. And scoring advantage is given to the fighter who lands the most hits / displays better aggressive attack style. And at the bottom of this list for scoring advantage is the fighter who commits the fewest rule violations. So from this list of most important to least important, this is kind of what they weigh for the entire fight. And scoring disadvantage occurs when the opponent successfully blocks their strikes with the arms for punches and elbows or the legs for shin. If you kick and they block with their shin, your kick is nullified. Scoring disadvantage also occurs when the strike is weak or lacks power. 2 fighters can throw a right middle kick, but the one that looks more impactful is going to be favored, even though it's kind of like the same number of activeness, if that makes sense. Scoring disadvantage occurs when the kicking leg is caught and they fall to the canvas. And this is due to poor balance, like they fall on their own, or a technique executed by the opponent. So if you throw a kick and they catch your kick and you fall, or you throw a kick, they catch your kick, and they sweep or dump you. And lastly, scoring disadvantage occurs when the fighter breaks any rule while using Muay Thai techniques or non-Muay Thai techniques. So we're going to get more onto fouls in the second part of the episode. But just really quick, an example of a foul while using Muay Thai technique would be the opponent has fallen to the canvas and both of their gloves are touching the floor. And then the opponent throws a knee, and the knee happens to land on the opponent whose gloves are on the canvas. And then an example of like a non-Muay Thai technique, judo throws. Okay, now talking about the point system. In Muay Thai, some promotions score the entire fight as a whole, whilst others score round by round. However, in the situations where fights are scored as a whole, the 10-point system is still used as a reference for each round. And if the fight comes close, they will read out the scorecards and say like, oh, judge 1 gave this person, you know, whatever. So with this point system, for both situations where they score as a whole and score as a round, they add up the points at the end and then give the fighter with the most cumulative points, they give them the win. So here's a basic breakdown of the round scoring system. Again, this varies from sanctioning to sanctioning, promotion to promotion. For the ones that jump out the most to me, I will mention it, but if in doubt, please refer to your local promotion or sanctioning body for their own scoring criteria and their system for giving the points. So an even round where nothing significant happens and both fighters look pretty even in their exchanges and their impactfulness, it will be scored as 10-10. There are some promotions where they do not do draws, they must give a winner for each round. One championship and one Lumpini is an example of this. They do not do draws for fights, so they do need to have a winner for each round. So they do not do 10-10. If there is a clear winner in the round, the person who won the round will get 10, and then the person who lost that round will get 9. If there is a dominant winner, so dominant as if one person just like really outshines the other person and makes the other person look like a straight up amateur. it will be scored as 10-8 even without one of them being counted for, being dropped, something like that. Not all promotions do this. So I know that WBC Muay Thai uses this as part of their scoring criteria. You can find this on their rules and regulations page on their website. They write that a 10-8 score shall be given when there is an overwhelming one-sided round. Even without a knockdown, a real beating by one of the fighters over the other shall always be a 10-8 round. So if there is a knockdown, the person who won the round will get 10 and the person who got knocked down and lost the round will get 8. However, if the person who won the round but got knocked down but still won the round as a whole, or got knocked out and then came back to actually win that round as a whole, then it will still be scored 10-10. And again, this is only for sanctioning bodies that have tie rounds. And if someone knocks down their opponent twice, then it would be scored as 10-7. Okay, now judging considerations. Given the point system and what I had mentioned earlier about the overview of what's most important in scoring fights and what's least important in scoring fights. So these are the judging considerations that I see for Muay Thai, especially in Thailand. Judges consider both strategy and technique. And understanding what these judges prioritize can help fighters adapt their style to win fights more consistently. So on a strategic level, in terms of important decision making, I would weigh effective strikes at 70%. 70% because this is the most critical factor. I had mentioned effective strikes, impactful strikes a few times already. Judges look for accurate, powerful strikes delivered with proper Muay Thai technique, and this is the bulk of what influences a decision for the judge to reward this fighter, the round, the fight. Ring generalship, I would weigh around 20%. Fighters who control the fight pace, they control the ring, they dictate the exchanges, and they defend effectively are rewarded. And pure aggression, I would give 10%. Pure aggression is less important than effective striking. However, if the fight is very close, the fighter who pushes the action and maintains aggression can gain an edge. Keep in mind though that just because someone is more aggressive does not mean that they are scoring more or doing better. Judging considerations on a technique level. Judges prefer clean, crisp techniques that hit the target and cause visible damage or imbalance. So aesthetics for Muay Thai technique does play a factor. Blocking and checking strikes reduce the score impact of those attacks. So like I mentioned earlier, a fighter throws a kick and the opponent checks it, that kick won't score points. Significant effects, so visible impact, notable effects, visible damage, causing the opponent to stumble, lose balance, break posture, or get knocked down, they score very highly. Additional considerations for judging. We'll talk about dominance, visible damage, posture and body language, and fouls. For dominance, fighters who sweep, throw, and counter their opponents effectively can gain more points. However, outside of Thailand, sweeps and dumps are sometimes not scored, just the kick. For visible damage, it's not the primary scoring factor, but cuts, redness, swelling, bruising can help sway the decision if the fight is close. Judges, especially in Thailand, consider fighters' posture when scoring the fight. If the posture is steady, strong, and maintained throughout the fight, it will go more in their favor as opposed to someone who is like, they get caught in a clinch and they get hunched over with the head down. Fighters who commit fewer fouls are favored in scoring, but this is usually as a last resort if the scoring is very close otherwise, and neither fighter made like really huge fouls, such as soccer kicks. So, given what we have just discussed about general scoring and judging considerations, hopefully now you understand why strikes to the midsection, namely middle kicks and loose knees, that are not defended against are so highly valued in Muay Thai. And we know Muay Thai to be famous partly because Muay Thai fighters, especially Thai Muay Thai fighters, have these devastatingly strong, effective kicks. These strikes to the midsection have the most visible impact. And that makes sense, right? Because that's where someone's core is, that's where their center of balance is. And if you can land a clean, hard shot to the core, it's going to look like it has more visible impact. So more visible impact, the strikes to the midsection, they're often better at causing timing disruption and breaking the opponent's posture. So this emphasis on midsection strikes has historically led many Muay Thai fighters to prioritize these techniques over other weapons. So a lot of kicks, a lot of loose knees. But in some cases, fighters have neglected their punching and boxing skills due to this traditional scoring system on the kicks, knees, and clinch. And because this is the system that I would say 99.9% of Thai fighters come up in, this is also the way that they start training when they're little. And this effect contributes to how many believe that Muay Thai fighters, they don't know how to throw punches, they don't know how to punch, they don't know how to box. And that to a degree is true because during my own time at multiple gyms, training with high level, mid-level, low level professional Thai fighters, and also just watching fights pretty regularly in person and on TV, there are a lot of pretty like beginner mistakes that some of these fighters make. Like they would punch from their shoulders instead of their face. They don't bring their hands back to their face after they punch. They don't know how to guard against punches, things like that. However, with the rise of entertainment-focused Muay Thai rule sets, we'll get more into this in the next episode, there's been a growing recognition of the importance of well-rounded striking skills. Many Muay Thai fighters are now working to develop their boxing techniques in addition to their traditional weapons. So a lot of the gyms that can afford to have hired boxing coaches. Some Muay Thai trainers can teach boxing very well, especially if they have experience in boxing. So my former trainer, he started off as a Muay Thai fighter, and then later, towards the end of his fighting career, he got into boxing. He actually won some boxing championships. So I was able to work on my boxing a lot with him. And because he had a Muay Thai base, he was able to effectively use that boxing for Muay Thai. Whereas I also know some people who Thai, but went into boxing because there was just more money in it and more opportunities back then to compete overseas and develop a name. When they transition to Muay Thai, they use techniques that may not always be effective for Muay Thai, like having the guard a little bit too low. They don't know how to defend against strikes and stuff like that. So ideally, it would be somewhat of a good Muay Thai foundation that has dabbled in boxing. But the pool of people in Thailand that have done this is really small, and they're probably Muay Thai trainers that it's really difficult to hire these people as just like boxing coaches. But this is all to say that this evolution reflects the dynamic nature of the sport and the ongoing adaptation to changing trends and demands. So let's get into traditional Muay Thai versus entertainment Muay Thai scoring. Traditional Muay Thai, we're going to talk about in a Thailand setting because, we're talking about tradition, we have to talk about Thailand. The pace of the fight follows a distinct rhythm over 5 rounds, typically. There are very few exceptions where they would apply the traditional Muay Thai scoring to a 3-round situation, but it's very, very rare. Now, what makes traditional Muay Thai different from quote-unquote entertainment style Muay Thai is mainly the presence of gambling on site. And we're going to get onto the effects of gamblers and why this has a huge shift and also the pros and cons of gamblers later on in the second part of the episode. Now, the presence of gamblers isn't the only thing, but it is a main thing. Unlike entertainment Muay Thai, traditional Muay Thai fights allow for these early feeling out rounds, especially in the first and sometimes second round. These feeling out rounds are where fighters test each other's styles, they test each other's reactions, and gamblers place their bets, and the corners try to develop a game plan on site with what they have in front of them. In traditional Muay Thai fights, judges assess a fighter's overall performance, not just the number of strikes landed. So while clean strikes and aggression are important, they are evaluated alongside factors such as strategy, resilience, and ring control. As the rounds progress through the 5 rounds, action intensifies, with the 4th round often carrying the most weight and the most action. The 4th round, we're going to talk about it more, but this 4th round is going to be very, very important. So the action intensifies, peaking in the 4th round. Now let's walk through what a typical 5-round fight might look like. The first round is often seen as a feeling out period where the fighters are testing, conserving their energy, While this round is still technically scored and recorded on the scorecards, it's generally a less aggressive round because the fighters are conserving their energy for the later rounds where the efforts are going to be weighed a lot more. And the first round is weighed probably the least. This measured approach is a hallmark of traditional Muay Thai, where strategy and patience are highly valued. This feeling out round also allows gamblers time to place their bets. If nothing significant happens during this first round, and usually nothing does, the scoring is fairly even and it's scored as 10-10. And for traditional Muay Thai, where if gamblers present and in a traditional Muay Thai stadium, it's always going to be 10-10. There are no exceptions if the round is even. Sometimes this feeling out process is carried into the second round. Usually the second round has more action than the first, but the purpose is generally the same, to test the reactions of the opponent and to allow the gamblers time and information to place their bets. Similarly to the first round, if nothing significant happens, it is scored as 10-10. But then a lot of the times, the Muay Thai community in Thailand kind of see these rounds as like, oh, they don't really count. Very interestingly, in the Phuket stadiums, like in the everyday shows, they do follow this traditional scoring system. And because there are a lot of foreigners that fight in Phuket, a lot of times the foreigners will get a first round knockout because the Thai opponent is still kind of like in the feeling out process and still like kind of warming themselves up and waking up into the fight. And then the foreigner, maybe because of how they are used to fighting in their home country, or they just want to take advantage of this feeling out period, they would just go for it and increase the action, and then the Thai opponent is not ready for it and they get knocked out. Now, the third round is when there's a considerable shift in action. There's increased intensity, increase in power, increase in activity, and gamblers usually start making a bigger fuss with like the "wee, oi" during the fight to encourage the favorite fighter to win. Fourth round is weighed the most in traditional Muay Thai fights. This round can dictate who wins by decision, wins the whole fight by decision, even if nothing significant happened for them in the previous rounds. It's during this round that the stakes are highest and there's most action. This round carries so much influence that people say, win this round, win the fight. Although it's not true in all cases, but I would say in most cases it is true. Similar to the first round, the fifth round is going to go back down to being more relaxed, especially if it's clear who has won the fight from rounds 1 through 4, who has already won the fight. If the outcome seems very obvious to the fighters, the corners, the gamblers, the action is going to slow down and the fighters will engage in what's often called like a dance-off, like dancing off in the fifth round. This dance-off, you can see it happen when the winning fighter offers up a glove touch, one-hand glove touch. And if the losing fighter touches it, then all of a sudden they're just kind of like walking around the ring. If they are fighting, they're not really during like hard exchanges and stuff. They're just, just trying to finish off the round. The losing fighter no longer wishes to engage in the fight to prevent further damage to themselves. And a winning fighter, they won already. They don't want to inflict unnecessary damage to their opponent or knock them out. I mean, if they won, they won. They get everything that they want with like the money and the win and stuff. So they're like, oh, I don't need to hurt this person, especially if I've already won. Very different in cultures, right? I think most of the time overseas, if it's very clear that someone won, sometimes they will go for the knockout. This touching gloves thing, it's a non-verbal agreement. No more real fighting will occur anymore if the gloves are touched by both fighters. And once this happen, and it's very obvious, sometimes the timing person will just finish the round early because they know that nothing's going to happen anymore and they don't want to waste people's time for like a 3-minute round where fighters are just walking around for 3 minutes, and then the fight would just go to decision. And then this shift in intensity is also part of the traditional flow where the fighters focus more on the defense, protecting their lead rather than pushing for a finish. However, there is an exception to this where the losing fighter does not want to engage in this dance-off. If the losing fighter has a strong desire to win, usually for financial reasons because the gym made a side bet or there's a big injection from the gambler, the only way to win is by knockout. And in this case, the losing fighter will do their best to knock out their opponent, usually with punches and elbows. And it's very obvious at this point who is currently the losing fighter and who is currently the winning fighter. So the losing fighter who's trying to win by knockout, they often look very desperate. And if they can't get the knockout, they're not going to win. And the person who won the fight, they usually just work on footwork and teeping, jabbing, and keeping this other fighter at bay at a distance so then they don't get knocked out. Now, until relatively recently, traditional Muay Thai, so this kind of flow that I have just described, primarily dominated a fighting scene in Thailand. Most locals were not interested in entertainment style fights. They were not interested. And by locals, I mean like the hardcore Muay Thai the people that are heavily involved in the Muay Thai community, they were not interested in these 3-round entertainment style fights. And now before the days of like One Championship and RWS, there was Max Muay Thai, there was like MX More Extreme, and then there were like odd promotions every now and then. But for the most part, most people were not very interested in these fights. Most fighters gain their experience under the traditional rules. Even with the popularity of other rule sets, the understanding of traditional Muay Thai remains a fundamental cornerstone of Muay Thai scoring in Thailand. Now, what is the deal with the gamblers anyway? I have said multiple times throughout that the gamblers have a big influence on traditional Muay Thai scoring. So what is the link between gambling and the sport? It's very complex and multifaceted, and it affects everything from match pairings to fighter performance. Here are some of the main ways in which gambling shapes Muay Thai, both positively and negatively, and why it remains such a contentious issue within the sport. If you wish to learn more about gambling more in depth, I'm going to release an article on this at some point in the future, and I will also release a additional podcast episode just to focus on gambling. And the article, when it is released, is going to be on moy-in.com, so periodically check back for that as well. So gamblers bring high levels of engagement to matches, but they also bring potential complications. With organized gambling, there's often a lot of ties to mafia-like groups and gangs, and the stakes can be extremely high. And anytime there's a involvement of a lot of money, the risk of corruption is always going to follow. Pressure on judges and biased judging. So judges in Thailand can find themselves under intense pressure due to gambling interests, especially if there's a large amount of money at stake. So they might be approached by gamblers and offered some money to, hey, can you make sure this happens, or this and that. Match fixing and corruption. Match fixing is rarely unearthed. Just because we don't hear about it that often doesn't mean it's an extremely rare occurrence. It's a very real issue in Muay Thai, largely driven by gambling interests. So this can be in the form of bribing fighters, bribing judges, bribing officials, or even poisoning fighters. Gamblers play a direct role in influencing how fights unfold through their loud support during, and they even give instructions to the fighters during the fight. If you open up YouTube and watch one of the old fights from like Lumpini or Rajadamnern, there's a lot of vocal involvement of gamblers. They shout instructions, cheer for their favorite fighters. So they shape the energy and the momentum of the match. Some of the gamblers will even bring like laser pointers and try to get the fighters or the corner's attention. And the influence of gamblers extends beyond just the fighters themselves. The people cornering the fighter, plus the supporters who are literally standing in the corner, they play a crucial role, often shouting support and instructions during the rounds. When the corners and gamblers get loud, it has a twofold effect. It boosts the morale of the fighter and subtly influences the judges, as the judges are not immune to the psychological impact of enthusiastic support. I mean, after all, they are human. So the presence of gamblers is a double-edged sword. Yes, it ensures that matches remain fair and competitive, but for fighters who enter the sport with the intention of developing their skills, honing their skills, and building a fair career, the gambling pressures can sometimes overshadow their personal growth and sportsmanship. There's a docudrama on Netflix called Hurts Like Hell, and it provides an inside look at gambling and the dark side of Muay Thai in Thailand. I've watched it. I can vouch for it. It's realistic, scary, and will open your eyes to what's the reality for most Thai fighters. So I'm going to end part 1 here, and then starting from part 2, we're going to get into entertainment Muay Thai, the pros and cons of each between traditional Muay Thai, entertainment Muay Thai. We're going to talk about scoring in Thailand versus outside of Thailand. We're going to talk about amateur versus professional, and we're going to talk about fouls and other considerations. Thank you for listening. I hope this part 1 was very insightful, and please stay tuned for part 2.